into theaters today. It is the first time they can reopen with in-person audiences since being shut down more than a year ago. But there are strict guidelines in place, like a 33% capacity limit, a cap of 100 people inside, 200 people outside. But if all attendees present a negative COVID-19 test, then that number goes up. 150 people could be inside, 500 people outside. State guidelines say masks and social distancing will also be required. A COVID alert just in. New Jersey-based Johnson & Johnson just announced it has started testing its vaccines in ages 12 to 17. First, the vaccine is being tested in 16 and 17-year-olds for safety and dosage. The study will then be expanded to include the larger group of adolescents. All right, some big changes right now for Moderna's vaccine. First, the FDA says it is okay for healthcare workers to extract 11 doses out of the 10-dose vials. And the FDA also approved new vials for Moderna. Those vials can hold 15 doses each, so these dosing updates really should help to speed up the vaccination process. And 1 year later, we're looking back at the pandemic through the eyes of the scientists saving lives. Rockland-based Pfizer was the first company to reach the finish line with the vaccine that's over 90% effective in adults, and just this week reported it being 100% effective in kids ages 12 to 15. This is an exclusive interview with two of Pfizer's female scientists who laid the foundation for developing the vaccine. News 12's Beth Cephalou talked to them.
It was a 24/7 news cycle of what's happening in the world, and then also what's happening in the lab. We were living, eating, sleeping, breathing, SARS-CoV-2 at that time.
How many hours a day do you think you were working at that point?
At least 16 to 20.
Oh my gosh.
6 or 7 days a week.
I'm sure it must have been tough.
It was. But you kind of go into robot mode. There's no thinking about what you're missing. There's just, we need to get this done. I was trusted with the phase 1 human data. So that data would come in all hours of the night. I would sometimes get data at 2 o'clock in the morning, work through the night, and then I would have it ready for senior leaders to take a look at, so that way decisions could be made in real time.
We did a lot of things in parallel, multiple groups at the same time, but we were really overlapping those activities. So it was a really strong partnership with a large group of people, and we did it.
What was it like when you finally learned how effective your vaccine was?
Amazed and very enthused. The FDA had put out their guidelines of at least 50% efficacy. And then when we heard 95%, I mean, it can't get much better than that. The scope of the impact is very, I don't know the right word for it, takes your breath away.
Yeah, I guess when we actually have the chance to stop and think about it and take it all in, it is an amazing feat that everyone's accomplished.
Does it upset you at all when you know all the work that you put into this vaccine to see that there's still people hesitant to take it?
It does break my heart. Just again on social media, just reading some of the comments, how this is a scam, how this isn't real. I can assure you it's very real. And the science that we're doing is very real.
What does it feel like to be a woman leading the charge for something like this?
It's an honor, and I really enjoy doing this, and I look to be a role model for my daughter and all the women out there.
If there are young girls that are interested in science and they see examples of not just myself but other leading women scientists pursuing their natural curiosities and the way things work and how we can help people feel better, then that's awesome, and that makes me really happy.
Wow, right? So much has changed over this past year, and we have come such a long way. But it's still a struggle for so many of us that are trying to balance life and parenting in this pandemic. So that's what we're talking about this morning. Dr. Lucy McBride is joining us again. She's a practicing internal medicine physician, and she has this popular COVID-19 newsletter where she provides real-time fact-based information and guidance on managing both the physical and mental health during this time of the pandemic. And Dr. Liz Matheis is with us. She's a licensed clinical psychologist and certified school therapist. So thank you both for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
And do remember, we want you to join in on this conversation for the next half hour. You can submit your questions and comments right under the live stream of this show. And I have to reflect on that story that we just saw, and you listen to, them talk about how many hours of work and, the hope that they have for their children in this. And Dr. McBride, I want to start with you, because you would think it seems like insurmountable odds that they're up against, and trying to parent at the same time that you're also trying to help find an answer and hope for the world.
Right. I mean, that story is extraordinary. The story of the vaccines is really a triumph of modern medicine. And, for the obvious reasons, finding vaccines that we now know are extraordinarily effective and safe has been an all hands on deck adventure, right? I mean, we've got every biologist, virologist, epidemiologist, immunologist, contributing to this enormous venture. And the good news here is this: the vaccines that we currently have available are extraordinarily effective, extraordinarily safe, and are our ticket forward.
Yeah, so, I took a look at some of the data because I wanted to quantify, this feeling that we're collectively going through. So the early research on the health effects of the pandemic so far go beyond the physical illness of it. And the epidemic is really placing such a stress on parents. 63% say the pandemic made the 2019-2020 school year extremely stressful for them. I'm surprised that number is actually not higher. This was conducted a Harris poll on behalf of the American Psychological Association, and that same survey found 77% of parents of 8 to 12-year-olds said the uncertainty of the 2021 school year was causing them stress right now. So, Dr. Matheis, when parents are trying to handle, what may be a remote situation, or your kids are all of a sudden in quarantine, or you're sending your kids to school, and then there's that fear as well. It puts a real stress on us.
There's been a ton of inconsistency and an unknown. I know as a parent myself, I received a phone call on Sunday night saying basically my kids can't go to school on Monday because the numbers came up too high. And the inconsistency has been very, very stressful for everyone. Parents who have to regroup their schedule, kids who intended on going into school and now they're not. It's incredibly stressful with the inconsistency, because the one place that we always say is very consistent is school. And you're going to go in at a certain time, the sequence of your classes, what it's going to be like, and it's been so different. And just interacting with my kids, and one of my sons had a virtual concert this week, and I got to see a picture of what the classroom looks like, and it's still overwhelms me when I see how far apart the desks are, how there's not a lot of interaction. So even being in the school, even when they are in school and there is a consistent schedule, it's still very different.
I know, Dr. McBride, you recently wrote this op-ed about, we've made this adjustment to pandemic life, but now we have this anxiety over also leaving it.
Right. So there's anxiety everywhere, right? Remember that we are wired for survival as human beings. So when we're faced with a threat like coronavirus, which is ubiquitous, invisible, and for a long time without a cure, we all are naturally afraid. So I think it's really important, and this is what I do with my patients every day, is to name the anxiety, name the vulnerability, name the fact that we are all experiencing some sort of trauma in some way. Whether you have lost a loved one to COVID-19, your face pressed against the ICU door saying goodbye, or you've lost your school year as a youngster, you have experienced some sort of loss. And what's important the reason it's important to realize that is because then you can start to understand how your thoughts and feelings affect your behaviors and how your behaviors affect your health. There are very real and tangible, measurable physical effects of mental health in crisis. This is a parallel pandemic of mental health in crisis. The good news about that is there are very clear ways we can work on our stress. Everybody's stressed, whether you're a teacher, a student, a parent. If you're a human being, you are experiencing some sort of stress. So what I'm recommending to my patients is name it, let's normalize it, and then let's navigate it together. Because at the end of the day, mental health is part of our whole health.
You know, it's interesting. I was moderating a panel this week with a bunch of working moms, and it was amazing to me how much better I felt at the end of this discussion, because it was this feeling of I'm not alone in feeling this way. And Dr. Matheis, I think part of that is to say, hey, I'm struggling, and to know you're not the only one feeling that way.
Absolutely. There's no shame in it at all. I think collectively, every single one of us is struggling. And any time that you can find your group of people where other moms and share your struggles and think about how you can work together collaboratively, even if by creating small pods or, creating your bubbles so that you can help entertain the kids and let them socialize, but to also just validate your experience. I know I went to a small birthday party outside a few weeks ago, and I was just talking to the other moms, and I can't tell you how many times I heard, oh, you too? Oh, you're experiencing that too? I'm like, yeah, my son hasn't come out of his pajamas since last March. So, it's very much a collective experience. You're absolutely right. And the more we can recognize that our experiences are not unique to us, the better we are going to be able to get through this and to really lean on each other.
Get back if you have me on camera.
You're so nice about it, Elizabeth.
Okay. Anyway, let's just move on. So we didn't get to everyone's questions, so those will definitely be in here. And I wanted to get to pandemic fatigue and decision fatigue. I don't know if you read that article in the Washington Post this week. If you didn't, it's fine. But just about we're kind of sick of having to make all these decisions. And in the beginning, I think as parents, it was more clear, black or white. Like, we know we shouldn't be doing this. No, you can't have your friends over. No, you can't, whatever. But now if there are sports and you just played with those kids, why can't we have a bunch of kids over? And how to kind of figure out what to do and what's the right thing for your family. And it puts so much pressure because you just don't want to be wrong. We've made it so far. And you just, you want to make sure that you get this right.
That's what's driving a lot of the anxiety, is this sort of gray area, right? It was easier when we had clear, crisp rules. Not that anyone liked lockdown,
right?
But you knew what where to be.
Exactly.
Now it's like this sort of like, oh man, every decision is potentially life or death.
Right. And it's interesting because I heard a lot of people who say all of a sudden they started knowing all these people that are COVID positive again. And it's like, oh, they had a gender reveal party. Oh, those people went to, and so you started to make these little tiny decisions of, you know what, I'm going to go to that. Yeah, let's do it. And then all of a sudden you have the repercussions of that. And I'm
not sure this is the moment to talk about it because I think we're just on Facebook. But
we are. Yes.
But one of the things, is that okay if I just
go for it.
A little. Yeah, so one of the things that I think is foundational and crucial, in addition to recognizing that we all are under stress in some way, is to make sure you're following the facts. We are being flooded with information, news, opinion about facts. It's important to realize who you trust and where you're getting your facts, because you can, if you're not getting.
We're about to come back on in 5 seconds.
Okay. Sure. Yep.
Welcome back to our live special report, The New Normal, as we talk about parenting in this pandemic. And of course, we're going to get to your questions. So if you have them, now's the time to send them in on our Facebook pages. Joining me this morning, Dr. Lucy McBride, a practicing internal medicine physician, and Dr. Liz Matheis, a licensed clinical psychologist and certified school psychologist. And I know one of the things that has been hard when we talk about, raising hopefully great children is the social emotional connection, obviously, that they're not able to have in the same way with their friends. And so much of it is through screens, Dr. McBride.
That's right. Normally I'm a parent of 3 teenagers, and normally, I get after my kids for being on screens and, shoo them out the door to get exercise and be in nature. But actually, in the pandemic, the screens have been somewhat of a lifesaver, right? It's a lifeline. Kids need socialization, peers. Adults do too, but kids, that's really the way they evolve and develop socially and emotionally. So I've been, relaxing my screen distress as a parent because I know that's how they connect. They're so isolated already without school. And as I think we all agree, kids need school like fish need water. And without school, they need to have that social connection. Social connection for all of us is essential for our mental health.
I agree. And I wonder how I'm going to ever be able to pull back the screen time that I've allowed my kids to have now. Susan wants to join the conversation. She says, every day we get an email from my district stating 1 to 3 people have tested positive, almost daily. Some are at home and have to quarantine. Others are being contact tested and told they don't have to quarantine. I have a friend who's immune compromised. She's concerned about sending her kids back because of fear that her child might make her sick. Until my daughter can get a shot, she's going to be home because she has asthma. And you can hear, just so much uncertainty, Dr. Matheis, in her comment.
Yeah, the back and forth of, I know my child needs socialization, needs to be in school, but I also am very afraid for her well-being as well as my own. And that's, I think, part of the fatigue and the decision fatigue that's happening for us is we don't know exactly what to do, but like Lucy said, stick to the facts and then think about what you're comfortable with, because it's a very personal decision. I know for myself as a parent, my kids are back in school and I understand I'm getting the same emails. We have this case, we have this number of cases, and my kids are across 3 schools. So the number of emails I'm getting is immense. But again, it's based on your personal comfort level. And because we are in that gray area, it's going to have to be a personal decision, and it is exhausting. But make your decision, stick to it, and then the bottom line is, if you need to, reassess and make a new decision.
I think that's one of the things that speaks to me, Dr. McBride, is this idea that as we learn more, it is okay to say, you know what, this is what we were doing, but now I'm going to kind of say, I'm going to change my stance on that.
Well, absolutely. The pandemic is not static, right? The science and the evidence is evolving as the scientific process does. That is normal, that is expected. The public health landscape is evolving, right? So we as physicians and other people in the field, public health experts, appropriately need to adjust with the new data and science. What's clear right now is that we know how to mitigate risk in schools. The evidence is there. The problem is not every school has the political will or the resources to open. But it's not mysterious how to open schools and to keep kids, faculty, staff, administrators safe. The challenge is that, we have, this is the United States of America, and there's politics involved, and there are different resources, and it's not equitably distributed, the resources. And then to layer on top of that is a ton of fear and anxiety about the situation that for many people is out of proportion to what's happening, but for many people is very, very real. If you have a special needs child who's at high risk, even one case in your school is going to make you anxious. But if you're a typical kid and your school is able to fund the resources needed to have the distancing and the ventilation and the masks, then you really might consider that your kids should be in school, because their mental health is so important and very much tied to being with peers and in a classroom.
And it's interesting you say that, because Susie says, as hard as it is for a typical child to learn remotely, our special needs kids are really struggling and missed out. They already struggled with socialization with their peers, and this is making it so much worse, Dr. Matheis.
It is. Our children are going to need a lot of catch-up time. But in the meantime, I'm partial, Lucy's partial. Our mental health, our children's mental health is really, to me, much more important. So if you're comfortable sending in your child to school, education is best served in school, and let them at the very least have the structure and have the interaction with their teachers and with their peers, because our children of all ages are really, really craving that social interaction and the just being in school and going through the day. the fact that we're sitting, all our children are just sitting in front of a computer for so long is really, it's wearing us down. It's wearing all of us down, their parents and the kids.
Diana says, my child is in school since the end of September when it opened. As a high school senior, we left it up to her, and she chose in person because kids need outside communication. And I think it's interesting, too, how many parents really were able to have those conversations with their children and say, you know, let's have you be part of this decision and let me hear what your thoughts are. I know my daughter made a whole list of all the reasons and the pros and the cons, and, you know, wanted to completely sell her case on this. So we're going to continue this conversation straight ahead. Do remember, if you have comments or questions, now is the time to open them up. I do want to say Mike wanted to mention open the playgrounds so kids can have a normal recess. You're watching News 12.
Life. This is as real as it gets.
This is real life.
Yeah.
The computer just like fell off the thing. Okay, now we're good.
You okay?
Yeah. Was that caught live? I'm sure it was.
You know, I saw you adjusting it. I wasn't really sure what was happening, but it wasn't the actual falling off part. I didn't catch, though.
Great. Oh my God.
As long
But this
as
is real
you didn't fall.
Oh my
gosh.
goodness.
You know what? There's so many. I'm sure we could do like a whole montage of bloopers from the pandemic because this is real life, right? It's like,
Right.
remember the BBC guy, like before
Yes,
the pandemic?
yes.
BBC guy? And
With
that
the
was
kid.
so hilarious.
Yeah.
I mean, now that's like a dime a dozen, right?
Yeah, that's normal.
That's like normal.
Yeah. So I did want to, if we can really quickly just mention that, you know, now that things are, you know, starting to warm up again, you know, the letting your kids go outside and getting them away from screen time. Like, how do we do that? And you know, that's why I wanted to mention that viewer. We only had like 10 seconds, so I just did it real quick. But
let's definitely talk about that. Let's talk about the safety. Like, let's talk about the way you mitigate risk. And one of them is being outside. Outside is naturally ventilated, so there's no reason you shouldn't be outside, except if your kid is addicted to screens, which a lot of kids are, including some of mine.
What do you think about wearing masks outside?
You don't need to if you're 6 feet apart from other people. You just don't need to. I mean, there's no way that the virus can hop from person to person outside if you're 6 feet apart. I mean, it's like biologically.
What about that guideline of now 3 feet apart? Like if we were mimicking the school.
So 3 feet. We're talking about. So the science shows that 3 feet that's the minimum inside a classroom. It doesn't mean that the virus has a yardstick, right? 4 feet is probably better, 5 feet is even better, 6 feet. But the risk of transmission of virus, if you're 3 feet apart, is lower if you're also masked. So the foundation there is that you're masked and you have good ventilation. So it's not just 3 feet by itself.
Right. So this is a shorter section.
Okay.
So you might see me wave my hand because it's only 2 minutes total. So
okay.
You'll probably each get about 45 seconds by the time I say hi and I jump into trying to go back outside. We're 5 seconds away.
This is fun. I like.
Welcome back to our live special report as we continue our conversation on parenting in this pandemic. And I know we were just talking about allowing our kids to go outside and how do we figure out what's okay. So Dr. McBride, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. So remember that the 3 main ways we mitigate risk and reduce the chances of the virus being transmitted from us to other people is number 1, masks, number 2, ventilation, and number 3, distancing. So when you're outside, which by the way, we all should be as much as possible, it's good for our mental health, it's good to be out in nature, we need it. When you're outside, you don't need to mask let me just say if, because I don't want the soundbite to go in the wrong. You don't need to mask if you're 6 feet away from other people. Now, let's face the fact that it's hard to distance kids on a playground, right? Like you can't control that. So, but from a biological standpoint, what we know about the virus is that if you're outside and you're more than 6 feet from others, the chances of transmitting virus is virtually nil. The playground should be open. Kids should be outside. They should be exercising and moving around. It's outdoors, naturally ventilated.
That's right. All right. Thank you both for joining us this morning. I feel like we could talk for another hour and a half on this. Now, coming up on Monday, what needs to happen right now is health officials fear there could be the surge of cases. People, of course, are now returning from spring break. We have joining us Dr. Thomas McGinn. He's the Executive Vice President of Physician Enterprise at Common Spirit Health. He will be with us on Monday on the new normal at 9 a.m. So thank you all for joining us this morning. Thank you for your questions and your comments. I'm Elizabeth Hashagen. More news straight ahead right here on News 12. Thank you both so much. I will definitely be in touch, and I will connect you both on Twitter.
Be fun.
Awesome.
Liz, really nice to meet you. Good luck with keep up the good work with all your. We need
Thank you.
An army of you.
I'm telling you, I love what I do. I'm intrigued by how you're